Okay, in this video we're going to talk about simple interest. Simple interest is a pretty basic idea. It just says that if someone lends somebody else an amount of money, so we've got here a big pile of cash, if you lend that money to somebody else, then typically there'll be an arrangement where after say 1 year passes, you get the money back plus you get an extra amount which is called interest. Okay, and every year that passes, so let's say another year passes, you get that extra amount of money again, that amount of interest, and it's usually a set percentage of the initial amount, which is usually called the principal amount, the amount of money you have at the start. Okay, so every time this set period of time elapses, you get a certain percentage of the original money, of the original amount. Okay, so let's do an example. Let's say the principal amount was $100 and the percentage that was agreed, it's called the interest rate. The interest rate that was agreed was 10%. That's a pretty good interest rate if you're lending money to a bank or something like that. Very good interest rate. Okay, so every year that passes you get 10% of that $100. 10% of $100 is $10. So after 1 year, you've now got $110. You've got your original 100 plus you've got your 10% interest. After 2 years, you get another $10. So now you've got $120. You had 110 after 1 year, and after another year you've got 120. After a third year passes, you get another $10. So obviously now up to 130. And that could go on and on forever. Okay, now to simplify this process, there's an equation that we can use to calculate how much interest we'll get after however many years have passed, and depending on what the interest rate is and how much money we had at the start. So those are the important quantities: the principal amount, the amount of money at the start, the interest rate, and the amount of time. That will allow us to determine how much interest, how much extra money we get over that period of time at that interest rate given that amount at the start. Okay, here's the equation that we use. Okay, so the interest earned equals the principal amount, whatever that is, the principal amount of money, times the rate of interest, which should be expressed as a percentage, and that's multiplied by the amount of time that passes in years. It's usually measured in years. It could be measured in other periods of time, but it's typically measured in years. And then you divide all of that by 100. And you can sort of imagine the reason for that is to turn this percentage into a decimal. Because what we're going to do is take the principal, multiply it by the percentage which we're going to turn into a decimal. So if it was 10%, we'd be multiplying the principal by 0.1. And then every time a year passes, we'll get that amount of extra money for every year that passes. So if the principal was $100 and we multiplied it by the rate of 10%, okay, and remember this 100 turns it into a decimal, so it's actually going to be 0.1. 10 over 100 would be 0.1. And then the amount of time, let's say it was 3 years, then the amount of interest is going to be 100 times 0.1 times 3, so that's going to be 100 times 0.3, 3 times 0.1, and that's going to be, move the decimal place 2 places for the 2 zeros, and it's going to become 30. The decimal point would end up just there, so it would become $30. So the interest that we'd earn after 3 years at 10% interest rate, if we started with $100, would be $30. Alright, we can simplify this equation, just reduce it to a nice couple of letters, like this. The amount of interest equals the principal times the rate times the time, and it's all divided by 100. So that's the equation that we'll use to work out interest. So write that down. Okay, now let's do a couple of practice problems to see if we can use this equation. So let's say we had an amount of money at the beginning, a principal amount of money that was $15,000, and we had a bank that was willing to give us an interest rate of 7%, a return of 7%. So every year, it's always expressed as a percentage per annum, which means per year. PA means per annum, which means per year. So the bank's willing to give us 7% of that 15,000 every year, and we're going to leave that money in the bank for 6 years. Okay, to calculate this, let's use the Casio ClassPad. We'll clear it all up so it's nice and clear for us. Okay, now to work this out, we're going to use the solve function. So we'll write in the solve function, which you can get from action, advanced, solve. There it is. Okay, in the solve function, we're going to put our equation. I equals, let's use 2D to make a fraction. On top, we've got P times R times T. Now, it's important that when you're putting in the PR and the T, that you separate them with the multiplication symbol, otherwise it won't work. And on the bottom we put 100. Okay, after that equation, put in the comma, which is just there, and we want to tell the equation to focus on I. That's the thing that we're going to be looking for. So we put comma and then the value that we're going to focus on, which for the moment is I, but later on it might change. Okay, then we can close the brackets, and now we've got to put in this vertical line here, which you can get from going down the bottom. There's Calc, Advanced and Option, and in Option you'll see this vertical line here. This allows us to define the variables in our equation. So we want to define P as 15,000, because we worked out we decided that's what P was. We want to define R as 7. You don't have to write the percentage, just write the number that the percentage is. So it's 7%, so just write 7. And then we want to define T as 6. T is always going to be in terms of years. So we put in T equals 6. And then when we press enter, it gives us the amount of interest that we would earn. So I equals 6,300. And that's going to be an amount in dollars. So that's saying that if we started with this amount of money and we get this amount of interest, that's our interest rate, and we leave it in the bank for 6 years, we'll get that much extra money back from the bank. So of course we'd have the 15,000 plus this. We would call that the total amount A. A would equal P plus I, the amount we started with plus the amount we gained, which would be 15,000 plus 6,300, and that would equal 21,300. Okay, now sometimes we want to work out I, but we can also use this equation to work out any of the other variables. Let's look at another situation. Okay, in this situation, we're asking how long would it take to earn $2,000 interest with a principal of $10,000 and an interest rate of 5%. So let's always, whenever we're doing these questions, it's always good to write out the key bits of info. So our principal this time is $10,000, we'll write 10,000. Our interest rate is 5%, so we'll write R is 5. And this time we know how much interest we want to end up with. That's not unknown to us. We know that I is going to be 2,000. The thing we don't know this time is T. We don't know what T is. Okay, and that's what we want to work out. How much time will it take to get this $2,000 of interest? Alright, let's go back to our equation. Now we don't actually have to change this equation here. All we've got to change is what we're focused on. We're going to change the focus of the equation from I to T. So we just change this little value after the comma to reflect what we're interested in. We're interested in T now. So we've got P. We can leave the P bit in there, but we're going to change the amount to 10,000. And we can leave R in there. We need to change that to 5. 5% is the rate now. But this bit we need to get rid of. We no longer know what T is, so we can't define T. That's what we're going to be trying to find. Instead we put in I, because we know what I is now. We define I as 2,000. Okay, and then we press enter, and it tells us that T equals 4 years. So we just learned that it would take 4 years to get $2,000 of interest with a $10,000 principal at 5% at a rate of 5%. Okay, now sometimes it might say it might ask you how many months would it take to earn that amount of interest. Okay, if we wanted to express this answer in months, what we'd have to do is take our 4 years, and to turn that into months we'd multiply it by 12 months, because there's 12 months in every year. So if you multiply 4 years by 12 months, you would get 48 months. Okay, so if we wanted to express the time in months, that's how we do it. Multiply the number of years by 12 months. Okay, so here's a summary of the simple interest information that we've covered. So we've got our formula for simple interest, and each of the terms is defined here. And if we get asked for the total amount of money, that's going to mean we have to find P and I and add them together. That's what we've got over here. And then we've got to know how to convert amounts of time into years. We always have to have our time in years. So if we get given a number of days, we would just divide that by 365, and that would give us a number of years. And if we get given a number of months, we would divide that by 12, and that would give us a number of years. And you can also rearrange these equations. If you want to get the number of days, or you want to get the number of months, you just rearrange the equation by multiplying by 12 for months, or multiplying by 365 to get days. Okay, and finally, let's summarize. So you can pause that if you need to copy it out, which you do, and we'll then look at the calculator summary. Okay, and finally, here's the calculator summary. So this is the equation that you need to enter into the calculator, this long thing here, and make sure that you've got the multiplication symbols in between your letters, and that you've defined the quantity that you are trying to find out here at the end of the solve section. So that could change. It could be I, or it could be P, R, or T, depending on what it is you want to know. And then after the solve section, then you have to define each of the 3 variables that you do know. So whichever variable you put here in the solve function, the other 3 need to be defined and given a value here. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you've got that. You can pause that and copy the summary out if you like, and maybe you'd like to have a go at the first 1 or 2 questions for the homework, and hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.